Inside, there was no confession, no apology, no grand revelation. There were only a few artifacts of a life she had tried to forget. Their marriage certificate, folded neatly. A single photograph from their wedding day, Elara looking young and radiant and terrified, Cale's hand possessively on her waist. And beneath it all, a small, clumsily carved wooden bird, painted in faded colors. Elara picked it up. It was a cumul, a bird of paradise, the national symbol. She remembered, with a jolt, a fleeting moment in those first deceptive weeks of their courtship. He had given this to her, a rough-hewn token he claimed to have carved himself. She had treasured it then, a symbol of the beautiful future he promised. A wave of sorrow washed over her, not for him, but for the naive, hopeful girl she had been. The girl who had believed in the promise of that carving. At the very bottom of the box was a single sheet of paper, folded in half. In Cale's harsh, angular script, were a few lines. I saw your picture in the paper. With your daughter. You look happy. The bird was a lie. I bought it at the market. I was always lying. That was all. No signature. No request for forgiveness. It was not an apology, but a final, stark admission of his own emptiness. He had seen her thriving life from a distance and, in his last days, had felt compelled to shatter one last illusion, to taint one last memory. Daniel reached for the note, his face dark with anger. Elara, I'm so sorry. What a cruel, pathetic. But Elara wasn't crying. She was looking at the crude wooden bird, then at the beautiful, vibrant painting above her fireplace. She looked out the window at her daughter, now sitting in the grass, telling a story to the patient dog. A strange sense of peace settled over her. This was not a ghost reaching from the grave to haunt her. It was the opposite. It was proof. She had built a life so full of truth and beauty that the one, sad lie he had sent her way seemed pitiful and small. It had no power here. She picked up the wooden bird, walked to the kitchen bin, and dropped it inside. The thud it made was final, insignificant. She kept the photograph and the marriage certificate. She didn't need to burn them in a ritual of rage. They were just paper now, historical documents of a war she had won. She would put them in the same box with her father's locket, a part of her history, but no longer a part of her. She turned to Daniel, taking his paint-stained hand in hers. It's okay, she said, and she meant it. It's just, closure. That evening, as she tucked Lena into bed, her daughter pointed to the painting over the fireplace. Mummy, you look so pretty there. You look happy. Elara kissed her forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of her. I am happy, my precious gold. So very happy. She had not just survived. She had not just healed. She had become so whole, so fortified by love, that the final, feeble attempt from the past to diminish her had simply evaporated in the light of her present, like morning mist under the strength of the sun. The story was truly, completely, over. And her own story, the one she wrote every day with her family, was more beautiful than any she could have ever imagined. The rhythm of life in the sun-drenched cottage settled back into its peaceful cadence. The metal box and its contents were relegated to a high shelf in the garage, a forgotten relic in a home too busy with present joy to dwell on past pain. Lena Patience was a whirlwind of curiosity, her world expanding with each passing day. It was on a Saturday market trip, with Lena perched on Daniel's shoulders, that Elara saw her. Anya. Not the ghost from the box, but the young woman from the safe house all those years ago. She was no longer the hollowed-out girl wrapped in a blanket. This woman stood straight behind a stall overflowing with vibrant, hand-woven bilums and intricate wood carvings. Her eyes, once darting with fear, now met Elara's with a steady, confident recognition. A small boy played at her feet, stacking colorful spools of thread. Elara? Anya said, a smile breaking across her face like dawn. The two women embraced, a wordless understanding passing between them. Anya introduced her son, Jonah, and her husband, Liam, a quiet, kind-eyed man who was carefully arranging carvings. "The loan from precious gold," Anya explained, her voice brimming with pride. "It was the start. I bought my first loom. Then another. Now," she gestured to the thriving stall. "Now we have this." Elara felt a swell of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This was the real legacy. Not the pain Kale had inflicted, but the countless lives like Anya's that had been rebuilt from its ashes. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a link in a chain of survival that stretched forward into the future. The invitation. A few months later, a different kind of letter arrived. It was from the National Ministry for Community Development. They were forming a new advisory committee on women's safety and economic empowerment, and her name, they wrote, had been strongly recommended by community leaders. They asked if she would consider serving. Daniel read the letter over her shoulder, his hands resting on her shoulders. "This is incredible, Elara. They need you." It meant travel to the capital for meetings. It meant a platform far larger than her local foundation. It was a daunting step into a world of policy and politics. The old whisper of doubt, a faint echo from a lifetime ago, hissed, "Who are you to do this?" But she looked at Daniel's believing face. She thought of Anya at her market stall. She thought of Lena, who was growing up in a world where her mother helped make the rules. She accepted. A voice at the table. The first meeting was in a sleek, air-conditioned conference room in Port Moresby. Elara, in a simple but elegant dress she bought for the occasion, felt a moment of surreal displacement. Among the politicians and high-level bureaucrats, she was the one who had lived the statistics they discussed. When a deputy minister spoke in dry, clinical terms about mitigating factors of intrafamilial violence, Elara found her voice. With respect, she interjected, her tone calm but firm. The room went quiet, all eyes turning to her. The term intrafamilial can sanitize what it really is. It's terror. It's a profound betrayal of trust that isolates women and makes them fear for their lives every day. Our policies can't just be about mitigation. They must be about creating clear, accessible escape routes and then providing the tools for a completely new life. She spoke not from a textbook, but from truth. She spoke of the psychological traps, the economic dependence, the twisted use of scripture. She saw nods around the table, especially from the other women present. She wasn't just offering an opinion, she was bearing witness. She had become the voice for the women who were still whispering in safe houses, too afraid to speak up for themselves. The full circle. Years turned. Lena Patience grew into a sharp, compassionate young woman with a fierce sense of justice, a blend of her mother's resilience and her father's creative soul. On the eve of her leaving for university in Australia to study law, she came to Elara's study. Elara was packing her briefcase for another committee meeting. On her desk, next to a photo of her and Daniel, was the old, faded picture of her father. "Mum," Lena said, leaning against the doorway. "I've been thinking. I want to focus on international human rights law. Specifically, on protections for women and children in situations of domestic violence." Elara's hands stilled. She looked at her daughter, really looked at her. She wasn't a child anymore. She was a force in the making. "What made you decide that?" Elara asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Lena walked in and picked up the photo of her grandfather. "Because of you. Because of Grandpa's locket. Because of the stories you've never hidden from me." She put the photo down and met her mother's gaze. "You fought your battle with a foundation and a safe house. I want to fight mine with the law. I want to help change the system so that it's harder for people to get away with what he did to you." Tears filled Elara's eyes, but they were tears of profound pride. The legacy was no longer just in the women she had helped directly. It was in her own daughter, who had inherited not the trauma, but the mission. The fight for a safer, more just world was being passed down, not as a burden, but as a calling. She pulled Lena into a tight embrace. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," she whispered. "And so am I." That weekend, the family gathered in the garden for a farewell dinner for Lena. Mrs. Anya was there, now very old and frail, but her eyes still held their sharp light. Ben and his family were there, and Sophia, and a few of the original women from the Precious Gold Foundation. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elara stood with Daniel, watching their daughter laugh with her cousins. The past was a closed book. The present was a blessing almost too beautiful to hold. And the future was bright, and it was in the hands of a new generation, armed with love, law, and an unshakable sense of justice. Elara's story had begun with a man who tried to erase her. But it would continue through the countless lives she had touched, and most of all, through her daughter, who would carry the light forward into the world, long after Elara was gone. The circle was not just complete, it was expanding, forever. The departure of Lena Patience for university in Australia left a quiet, Lena-shaped space in the cottage. It was a good quiet, filled with pride and the rustle of her frequent letters and video calls. Elara and Daniel rediscovered the rhythm of being just the two of them, their love a comfortable, well-worn sweater. Elara's work on the National Committee was demanding but fulfilling. She became known for her unwavering, grounded perspective, a voice that consistently pulled discussions back from abstract policy to tangible human need. She was drafting a proposal for a nationwide network of emergency alert systems in remote communities when the first tremor hit. It was a small thing. A momentary lapse. She was reaching for a book on a high shelf in her study, her briefcase open on the desk below. Her vision blurred at the edges, and a wave of dizzying nausea washed over her. She steadied herself on the shelf, breathing deeply until it passed. She blamed it on stress, on skipping lunch. But it happened again a week later in the market. The vibrant colors of the fruit stalls suddenly swam together, and the cheerful cacophony of voices melted into a dissonant roar. Daniel's hand was on her elbow in an instant, his face etched with concern. "Elara?" "I'm fine," she said, the automatic response of a woman who had spent years downplaying her pain. "Just a bit lightheaded." "The heat." Daniel didn't argue, but his artist's eye, so attuned to the subtlest shifts in form and color, had seen the pallor beneath her tan, the faint tremor in her hand. He insisted on a checkup. Dr. Apadas, now semi-retired but still seeing a few special patients, ran the tests herself. Her kind face was grim when she called them back into her office. "It's not stress, Elara," she said gently, pointing to the scans illuminated on the lightbox. "There's a growth. Here." She pointed to a shadowy mass nestled deep within Elara's brain. "It's in a very delicate area. The symptoms you're experiencing, they're likely to get worse." The world, so solid and bright just moments before, seemed to tilt on its axis. It wasn't fear of death that gripped Elara first, but a fierce, roaring sense of injustice. Not now. Not after everything. Not when her life was so perfectly, hard-wonly good. The diagnosis was a glioblastoma, aggressive and inoperable. The prognosis was a timeline measured in months, not years. They told Lena together over a video call. Their daughter's face, so full of the future, crumpled. The distance between Port Moresby and Sydney suddenly felt like an impossible chasm. "I'm coming home," Lena said immediately, her voice thick with tears. "I'll defer my studies." "No," Elara said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "You will not. You will stay exactly where you are." She looked at her daughter, at the fierce, brilliant woman she had become. "This is not your fight to take on. Your fight is out there, in the world. You finishing your degree, that is how you fight for me." It was the hardest edict she had ever given. But she would not have her daughter's life derailed by this. She would not allow this disease to steal two futures. The fight that followed was different from any she had known. It was not against a monster she could name and defy, but a silent, insidious thief within. There were rounds of radiation and chemotherapy that left her frail and exhausted. She lost her hair, the regrowth from her first battle with cancer now falling out again. But Alara Solis did not spend her days dying. She spent them living, with a fierce, deliberate intensity. She and Daniel took short, slow walks in the garden, his arm always there to steady her. They spent afternoons on the porch, often in comfortable silence, simply holding hands, memorizing the feel of each other's skin. She began to write. Not policy papers, but letters. To Lena, for every birthday and milestone she might miss. To Daniel, love letters for a future without her. To the board of precious gold, instructions and encouragement. She wrote down memories of her father, stories for grandchildren she would never meet. She was curating her legacy, not as a monument, but as a compass for those she loved. The last gathering. As the end drew near, she asked for one last thing. She wanted everyone to come. Not for a somber vigil, but for a party. They came. Lena flew home, her first-year exams completed at the top of her class. Ben and his family, Sophia with her grandchildren, Mrs. Anya, helped into a comfortable chair in the shade, Anya from the market with her now teenage son, Jonah. The garden was filled with the people whose lives were intertwined with hers. Alara, wrapped in a beautiful shawl, sat amongst them like a queen holding court. She was frail, her voice softer, but her spirit was luminous. She told stories, she laughed, she listened to everyone else's. She passed her father's locket to Lena, closing her daughter's fingers around it. Never forget your worth, she whispered. When the fatigue became too much, Daniel carried her inside to their bed, the sounds of laughter and music from her beloved friends and family drifting through the window. It was the soundtrack of her life. She died peacefully 2 days later, with Daniel holding one hand and Lena holding the other. The last thing she saw was not the shadow of the disease, but the faces of the two people who had shown her the true meaning of love. The legacy. Her funeral was not a mournful affair, but a celebration. The church was overflowing. There were politicians and community leaders, but also hundreds of women. The seamstresses, the market vendors, the teachers, the mothers, whose lives had been touched by precious gold. They stood as a silent, powerful testament to a life that had mattered. Lena, wearing her mother's locket, did not give a eulogy of sorrow. She stood tall and spoke of a warrior, a builder, a woman who had taught her that the greatest strength lies not in never falling, but in rising every time, and in lifting others up as you go. Daniel, his grief a quiet, profound thing, found solace in his studio. He began a new painting, not of a landscape, but of a golden light breaking through a dense, dark forest, illuminating a path for others to follow. Alara was gone. But the light she had kindled, in her family, in her community, in the laws she helped shape, and in the heart of every woman who found the courage to walk out of darkness, that light did not go out. It burned on, brighter than ever, a permanent dawn against the retreating night. Her story was over, but its echo would shape generations to come. The quiet in the cottage after Alara's passing was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the peaceful, companionable silence she and Daniel had shared, but a profound and aching absence. The air itself felt stiller, as if waiting for a laugh that would never come again. Daniel moved through the rooms like a ghost. He'd pick up one of her books, trace the spine where her fingers had rested, and put it down again. The bed was too big, the mornings too long. The garden, once their shared project, seemed to mourn with him, the colors less vibrant, the blooms bowing their heads. Lena stayed for a month after the funeral, a solid, grieving presence. She was so like her mother, the same thoughtful pause before speaking, the same steel in her spine when faced with a difficult task. She helped Daniel sort through Alara's things, not to discard them, but to honor them. They found the letters. Dozens of them, neatly bundled and labeled in Alara's elegant script. *For Lena, on your 21st. For Daniel, when you miss me. For my first grandchild. For the board of precious gold, 5-year vision, *. Lena held the letter meant for her 21st birthday, her hands trembling. She was planning for a future she knew she wouldn't see, she whispered, her voice cracking. She was building a bridge for you, Daniel said, his own eyes wet. So you would never feel alone. When it was time for Lena to return to university, the goodbye was heavy. I should stay, she insisted, the old fear of abandoning a loved one in need resurfacing. Daniel cupped her face, his hands still smelling of oil paint and turpentine. Your mother's last and fiercest command was for you to become the brilliant woman you are meant to be. Honoring that is not abandoning me. Go. Make her proud. I'll be here, learning how to be. The first letter. Alone, Daniel waited for a day when the grief felt less like a suffocating blanket and more like a heavy coat he could function beneath. He took the letter labeled for Daniel, when you miss me, out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings. His hands shook as he opened it. My dearest Daniel. If you are reading this, then I've gone ahead to scout the next great adventure. I imagine you're sitting on our porch, and Bummy is probably begging for a scrap he doesn't deserve, give it to him anyway. I need you to know something, with every fiber of my being, marrying you was the greatest act of courage and joy of my life. You didn't just love me, you reminded me that I was inherently lovable. You gave me a safe harbor after a lifetime of storms, and for that, I will be grateful for all eternity. Don't you dare stop painting. The world needs your beauty. And don't you dare live the rest of your life in the shadow of missing me. Grieve me, yes. Miss me, absolutely. But then, my love, you must keep living. Live for both of us. Travel somewhere we never got to see. Eat a ridiculously expensive meal. Laugh so hard you cry. Fall in love with life all over again. It is the greatest honor you could ever do me. Yours, in this life and the next. Ilara. Daniel read it once, then again, and then a third time, sobbing quietly into the still morning air. It was a map, a direct message from her heart to his, giving him permission to feel everything and, eventually, to heal. He took her words to heart. He started painting again. The first few attempts were dark, chaotic swirls of grief. But slowly, the colors began to return. He started a series he called The Language of Light, capturing the way the sun hit the leaves in their garden, the way it danced on the water at the beach they loved. He began having weekly dinners with Ben and his family. He volunteered his time to paint a vibrant mural for the precious gold safe house, turning its outer wall into a cascade of golden Kümmel birds in flight. He was learning. He was living. Lena, Path. In Sydney, Lena framed her mother's letter and hung it above her desk. She attacked her studies with a ferocity that both worried and impressed her professors. Her mother's fight was now her own, but she was armed with a law degree instead of a safe house. She called Daniel every Sunday, their conversations a lifeline. She told him about her classes, about a boy she was seeing, about her dreams of arguing before the Supreme Court. He told her about his paintings, about the mango tree's incredible yield, about how Mrs. Anya's great-grandson had just started school. During her final year, she chose her dissertation topic, Legal Loopholes and Legislative Barriers, Protecting Victims of Coercive Control in Papua New Guinea. Her dedication page read, For my mother, Ilara. Who taught me that the law is nothing without justice, and justice is nothing without courage. The Unveiling. A year after Ilara's death, on the anniversary, the community gathered again. This time, it was at the Precious Gold headquarters for the unveiling of Daniel's finished mural and a memorial garden planted in Ilara's name. Lena flew home to speak. She stood before the crowd, no longer a grieving daughter, but a young woman poised to change the world. She spoke of her mother's legacy not as something finished, but as a living, breathing force. He was learning. He was living. Lena, Path. In Sydney, Lena framed her mother's letter and hung it above her desk. She attacked her studies with a ferocity that both worried and impressed her professors. Her mother's fight was now her own, but she was armed with a law degree instead of a safe house. She called Daniel every Sunday, their conversations a lifeline. She told him about her classes, about a boy she was seeing, about her dreams of arguing before the Supreme Court. He told her about his paintings, about the mango tree's incredible yield, about how Mrs. Anya's great-grandson had just started school. During her final year, she chose her dissertation topic, Legal Loopholes and Legislative Barriers, Protecting Victims of Coercive Control in Papua New Guinea. Her dedication page read, "For my mother, Elara, who taught me that the law is nothing without justice, and justice is nothing without courage." The unveiling. A year after Elara's death, on the anniversary, the community gathered again. This time, it was at the Precious Gold headquarters for the unveiling of Daniel's finished mural and a memorial garden planted in Elara's name. Lena flew home to speak. She stood before the crowd, no longer a grieving daughter, but a young woman poised to change the world. She spoke of her mother's legacy not as something finished, but as a living, breathing force. "My mother's work doesn't end with the wonderful women in this foundation," Lena said, her voice clear and strong. "It continues in the courtrooms, in the parliament, in the laws that are supposed to protect us. I will spend my life making sure that the legal system becomes the escape route she once had to build with her own hands." After the speeches, Daniel found Lena in the new garden, sitting on a bench beside a plaque that bore her mother's name and the dates of her life. "She'd be so proud of you," he said, sitting beside her. "I know," Lena said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I finally feel like I'm not just missing her. I'm continuing her." Daniel put his arm around her. The grief was still there, a familiar ache. But it was now woven through with pride, with love, with purpose. Elara was gone, but the world she had rebuilt, the world of their cottage, of this foundation, of their daughter's brilliant future, remained, solid and real and good. The story of the woman who had been broken and then remade herself into gold was over. But the story of the light she had left behind, it had only just begun. After the speeches, Daniel found Lena in the new garden, sitting on a bench beside a plaque that bore her mother's name and the dates of her life. "She'd be so proud of you," he said, sitting beside her. "I know," Lena said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I finally feel like I'm not just missing her. I'm continuing her." Daniel put his arm around her. The grief was still there, a familiar ache. But it was now woven through with pride, with love, with purpose. Elara was gone, but the world she had rebuilt, the world of their cottage, of this foundation, of their daughter's brilliant future, remained, solid and real and good. The story of the woman who had been broken and then remade herself into gold was over. But the story of the light she had left behind, it had only just begun.